It has been a fascinating 24 hours of reflection, of fallout in the wonderful world of East Anglian football following the big game, the East Anglian derby, and Ipswich's victory, the first in 16 years over Norwich City. Does it signify, does it complete, does it full stop maybe what we thought we knew, a completion of a power shift in that particular part of the world? Let me know your thoughts down there in the comments. It had become tired, hadn't it? A horrible cliche that Ipswich never, ever, ever beat Norwich. And it had got quite ridiculous, hadn't it? 2009 to 2025 will go down in East Anglian football folklore as Norwich's undefeated streak. And look, cycles happen in football. Teams rise, teams fall, teams have good periods, teams have bad periods. Look, there are some, quote, rivalries where one team always and permanently has it over the other. There's always been a good sense of ebb and flow with Ipswich and Norwich, obviously, through the most part of the last century with the great periods under Alf Ramsey and Bobby Robson. It was Ipswich in the ascendancy. Then you go into the 90s and the Premier League era, and maybe it's Norwich, maybe it's tit for tat. And then you go into the 21st century and it's very much Norwich, particularly from 2010, or as I said, 2009, through to yesterday, basically. And it did feel a very significant day yesterday. And not necessarily, as I say, anything we didn't know already, as in this is the catalyst for a power shift. Let's be honest, in life, in politics, in business, a power shift doesn't happen just like that. These things happen gradually. And maybe yesterday was a confirmation of the kind of switch. Because if you go back to 2009 and Ipswich's last win, Norwich went down to League One and they came back with a vengeance under Paul Lambert with a brilliant double promotion. And from that moment onwards, really, Ipswich had Marcus Evans as, at that point, a wealthy enough owner in the Championship. That was soon going to change in terms of money and TV money, particularly in the hierarchy of English football. And from then on, really, Norwich became a team that were either in the Premier League or challenging to get into the Premier League. And Ipswich became a team that got further and further away from the Premier League to the point of spending plenty of time, let's just say, down in League One. Now, Ipswich have the takeover and come roaring back and kind of do what Norwich did, the double promotion from League One straight through Championship, straight up to Premier League. But there was still the sense that that was something that happened very, very quickly, and that Norwich were just more established and more seasoned and more tenured and had taken the riches of the Premier League and built up a club and built up a stadium and a squad and an expectation of where they should be in the English football hierarchy. And maybe of all the teams that have kind of yo-yoed, so to speak, use whatever words you're comfortable with, between Premier League and the top of the Championship, maybe Norwich were the best at exerting that advantage on those below them and keeping themselves above your average bog standard Championship team and always being there or thereabouts and changing up at the top of the table. The sense I'm getting from my Norwich counterparts at the moment is, has that sizzle run out? Are the embers of that flame burning out right now? That, a team that was double promoted under Paul Lambert, that stopped up brilliantly with Grant Holt and Wes Hoolahan, and then bounced with Alex Neil and, were up again and came back down and bounced again and retooled under Daniel Farker quite brilliantly, and Stuart Webber and Emi Buendia and Teemu Pukki, and went up and then bounced again during COVID and came down again. And this is where things have hit the buffers a little bit for Norwich, haven't they? Where Dean Smith came in and they didn't go up. And then they switched to David Wagner and they didn't go up. And key in all of this, it's all about the money always. Then the parachute payments ran out, but there wasn't the really clever retooling that had been done with Stuart Webber and Daniel Farker and those players we mentioned, and also that young crop of Max Aarons and Jamal Lewis and Ben Godfrey and Todd Cantwell all coming through at the same time. Brilliantly utilised by Daniel Farker. Then it went to Stuart Webber out, Ben Napper in, Johannes Hoff-Torap has a season, and now we go to Liam Manning this season. And it feels like 2 years in a row Norwich have rolled the dice and tried something that hasn't come off. And you know what it's like in the Championship. They say if you're not going forward, you're not standing still, you're going backwards, essentially. And you have this system, you use whatever words to describe it you like, where three teams come down and just a bankroll massively ahead of everybody else. And as I say, Norwich had done that quite brilliantly, really, in terms of keeping that tail going and going and going of being above your average Championship side. Well, with Norwich not moving forward, they're by definition standing still or going backwards. Ipswich, all of a sudden, are a team who's gone up with double promotion and, you know, have that advantage of the system we get, where if you're up for one season, you get 2 years of parachute payments, and you can build a squad to put you above average, or well above average, some would say, in terms of, you know, battling in the Championship. And whilst we knew this was going to happen, the moment that Ipswich were promoted, frankly, you know, the minimum you're going to get is a season in the Premier League and then 2 years worth of parachute payments. Again, don't hate the player, hate the game. Success often follows the money, and certainly opportunity, let alone success, follows the money in football. But there needed a couple of things to happen for the shift in power to be rubber stamped. It needed Norwich to have not succeeded in the time Ipswich were away in the Premier League, and obviously losing out in the playoffs the season Ipswich went up under David Wagner, and then the Johannes Hoff-Torap experiment not working happened in the background. And then it needed for the two teams to meet on equal ground, and by equal ground I only mean the Championship, because I sat here many times and said, is it really equal ground when Marcus Evans, Ipswich of Paul Lambert and Colin Quaynor and Cole Skews and Luke Chambers met Norwich's parachute fuel team of Daniel Farker in the dugout and Emi Buendia and Teemu Pukki and those brilliant young players. They were on level ground, but they were chasms apart. And I'm not going to go in as far as to say Ipswich and Norwich are chasms apart at the moment, but just at the end of that game and a couple of things happening in the second half, you could see this is confirmation that the power has shifted in East Anglia. It's an even game. Worldy by Jaden Philogene just before half-time, where you can now say, oh, which club has the players in this game to do something magic, to make the difference, to pull a goal out of nowhere? Well, Ipswich had those players yesterday. And then two things in the second half, a treble substitution where Ipswich are bringing on Azon and Clark, and in particular Nunes, who would probably be playing for Norwich in this game had he not made the switch for £7.5 million at the start of the season. Felt very, very symbolic. Not even the game, the result, that moment, that substitution where Ipswich kind of waved the flag, flexed the muscle to say, right, we can do something that you used to be able to do to us that you can no longer do now, and we're going to do it. And they grabbed the third goal, all of the substitutes combined, and then there did seem to be, right, Ipswich got 2 goals up in a derby, going to win for the first time in 16 years. And at that point, it became very clear the trend up until this point now of where the two clubs appear to be going. Now, what happens next remains to be seen. There are no guarantees in football. And as I said, having the money guarantees you the opportunity. It doesn't guarantee you the success. And we've seen plenty of teams have bold owners and have the parachute payments, the TV money, and not manage to get that advantage over the line. So even though Ipswich look very strong, and I can see 11 points in the past 5 games and a game in hand that if Ipswich were to win would put them in the top 4, and you would then think a challenge for automatic promotion, which could well end with another season in the Premier League. And again, like Norwich did, you get that second season and that tail goes longer and longer in terms of 10 years where you're more towards that top 20 club than a top 30 or lower club in English football. So that would be the thought for Ipswich. The thought for Norwich is, listening to some Norwich fans and a couple of Norwich podcasts just on the train back from doing the Sportsman podcast, which you can check out over on their channel. It should be out about now, is that Norwich are trending downwards. And even though I was excited by their transfer business in the summer, that have they got a squad of young, unproven players that have maybe been overpriced now rather than having all the potential? And do they fit the manager they've brought in? And can you arrest a downward trend for Norwich? Yes, they did finish 6th under David Wagner, but the other 2 finishes have been 13th. That's the bottom half of the championship. And if you do the maths, if you go down a couple of places, you're then closer to the bottom 6th than you are the middle of the table in the championship. So as much as it's etched into our brains over the last 10, 15 years that Norwich are not a bottom half championship side, they're a side that is in the Premier League or challenges to be in the Premier League. Cycles happen and cycles begin and end. And you wouldn't wish it on those Norwich fans, but it could be, if that cycle ends, well, where are you? You're in the bottom half of the championship, and you're looking down rather than up. And it's a law of diminishing returns. You've got less money year on year. 3 teams are coming down from the Premier League every year with more money. You've got owners like Birmingham and Wrexham. You've got teams coming up. What if a Bradford comes up, or a Cardiff comes back, or a Huddersfield returns on kind of level pegging, and all of a sudden you're getting lost in the shuffle. And very much like Ipswich did under Marcus Evans, you're circling that drain. And, as I said, if you're not moving forward, you're not staying still, you are going backwards in football. And we all know that. I like Liam Manning. I think he's a good manager. But if there's a bad trend down in terms of law of diminishing returns at Norwich, then maybe that is the direction of travel. Or maybe he'll turn it around and we'll be sat here in the next East Anglian derby and Norwich have got their win back and, things are closer than they are now. But right now, it feels, in the aftermath of Ipswich's first win in the East Anglian derby, that not necessarily a significant moment in terms of what it's going to prove to happen next, but a significant full stop, a line in the sand, a confirmation that over this past few years, basically since Ipswich had their takeover confirmed and came through League One and Norwich didn't keep that tail going of parachute payments, that we have had a big change of power and a shift in East Anglian football. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Ipswich fan, Norwich fan of any team, get your views in. Please do one thing for me. Play nicely in the comments. We know it can get a bit tribal and a bit emotional down there, but I'm really interested to hear your views. And we will link something up there. I'll just click best for viewer. Stick with the channel. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Plenty of stuff coming through the international break. And let me know who you want to see me collaborating with and get involved in the Q&A that we'll have at the end of the weekend Moreover, give me your views on a shift of power in East Anglian football.